Hello, this is Eric Devereaux, and welcome back to this series of videos about my textbook, Methods of Policy Analysis. In this video, we're going to be switching gears and moving into the second part of the book. Previously, these videos have looked at different methods for trying to diagnose why we are getting less than acceptable policy outcomes. In the second part of the book, we switch and talk about different ways to come up with alternatives for putting in place new policies or changing existing policies that might give us better outcomes, more preferable outcomes, outcomes that our bosses, our organizations, our clients would like to see. So let me do what I've done before, and let me start out just by showing you the first page of the next chapter in the book, which is chapter 9, which is where this conversation begins in the book about theories of change. So this phrase, a theory of change, is used in two fields. It's used in policy analysis, and it is often used in the field of program evaluation. The two fields are very strongly connected. Program evaluation is focused on looking retrospectively at what has been accomplished through a public policy. Policy analysis takes that information and tries to think about what could be done in the future. So whereas program evaluation is looking back in time, policy analysis is projecting forward in time to say, if we do the following new things in public policy, we will get more improved results. We'll get outcomes that are more preferable that we would like to see. So now I'm going to switch, and I'm going to use the device that I've been using to draw on these videos, and I'm going to start making some notes for you that are based directly out of the book. So again, let's start. We're talking about policy analysis. The act of policy analysis is not just about figuring out how did we get in a position that we are not happy with. Policy analysis is directly connected to creating theories of change. Now, these are called theories of change because they have an element to them always that is speculative. Basically, we have reasons to believe that if we do the following things in public policy, if we make the following changes, if we engage in the following interventions, that we actually will see improved results. So it is in many ways a theory, and then what unfolds after the point that we do some sort of intervention, make a change in public policy, we will see whether or not it works. And I want to circle back to what was said in the very first chapter of the textbook. A public policy is predominantly about a decision to use resources. You use those resources, and then you see what changes in the world because you use those resources. And included within that is the very important point that a decision not to use resources at all to address an issue is also a public policy. 0 is a number, and in our world, the decision not to act is the same as the decision to act with regard to the choices that are facing us in addressing issues in the world. So a lot of the thinking that goes on from this point forward strongly connected to something else that comes out of program evaluation, which is called a logic model. In a logic model, we recognize first and foremost that we have resources to deploy. And again, those resources, the use of those resources is often what we mean when we talk about a public policy. We take those resources and we use them to create programs in the world. You could also call them interventions. We change what government does. We change what a nonprofit organization does. We do something different that affects the community using the resources to run programs or interventions. And the first thing that comes out of that is that we can count outputs. Now, previously, we talked about different types of models that we use in policy analysis that are built first and foremost around counting outputs. How many people did we serve? How much money did we spend on a person? How much time did we give them in a program? What type of program did we offer them? Did they complete the program? What percentage completed the program? These are all outputs. And then, because of those outputs, we hope that those outputs will cause, and I'm going to make this a double line to sort of represent cause, outcomes. We want to change outcomes using the outputs. And there are two places where we really are looking at something that constitutes theory when we use this model to think about how to change the world. First, does this use of resources actually result in the programs we would like to see? And then second, most importantly, do we really believe that outputs are going to cause the desirable outcomes that we would like to see? Are we sure in our convictions in that regard? So the book talks about a couple different techniques for figuring out how to build a theory of change. The most important technique is backward reasoning. I always encourage backward reasoning. You reason from the result you were trying to achieve. You reason to the policy, right? You go from the result to the policy, thinking backwards. If we want to achieve this result, what policy is going to get us there? And are we convinced that a number one question we can always ask, is the policy commensurate with the problem? That is our intervention, is our use of resources actually commensurate with the problem we are trying to address? If it is not commensurate, and often we struggle, governments struggle, organizations struggle to get sufficient resources to be commensurate to the nature of the problem, then all I can say is good luck with that, because you are very unlikely to change the world in the manner that you seek if you cannot apply a commensurate amount of resources to solve the problem. Okay? Something that is evident all the time in doing this type of work is the means ends chain. And the means ends chain is the realization that if we have um, if we have the means, that is the resources, to produce a certain set of ends, okay, then this ends becomes itself a means to another end. And we tend to see this type of chaining going on again and again and again, where one outcome, one output, one result leads to the next. And we chain from here to here to here, okay? And when you're building theories of change, you want to think about this will lead to this, and then this will lead to this, and then that will lead to that, and we will eventually get to where we want to go, okay? And so there's a sequence of means and ends connections, okay, where one outcome or maybe one output leads to the next. But this gets us immediately into one of the great pitfalls in public policy and in public policy analysis, and that is we want to avoid goal displacement. Goal displacement is something that occurs anytime we have this type of means ends chain. Goal displacement occurs when we forget about the ultimate objective, okay? You lose sight of the ultimate objective. And you do that because you become obsessed with something intermediate in the process. Let's say you become obsessed here, right? You are sidetracked. You get sidetracked by an intermediate step. And let me just give you one really quick example, a very famous example in the world of goal displacement. So our goal is to improve K through 12 education. Goal is to improve K through 12 education. Well, what do we want to see? We want to see better educational outcomes, especially for a person's graduating from high school. We want to see that they can read, they can do math, and they have reasoning skills, and many of the other capacities that we associate with success in life, maybe going to college, maybe going right into the workforce. These things really matter. Well, along the way, we want to figure out how we're doing, right? And an intermediate step that always comes up in this effort to improve education are standardized tests. Standardized tests are very specific. They can be highly quantified and focused upon. And what happens, we often see, is that we become so obsessed with these tests and everything about these tests and the results of the tests. Are the tests biased? Are the tests appropriate? What about high stakes testing, where we might punish schools if they don't have good test results, punish them by not giving them the budgets that they want or not giving their teachers bonuses? And the standardized tests become the entire focus of the effort. And we forget that our ultimate goal was to improve K to 12 education. And there is a connection, but not the strongest connection, between these standardized tests and that result. But we've seen with education policy reform in the United States over the last 30 to 40 years, an increased obsession with standardized testing, universal standardized testing, high stakes testing, but lost in the mix is that ultimate goal of asking, is any of this actually improving K to 12 education? Are we getting better outcomes? Are the tests really the key in all of this, or is something else at play? So that's a very classic example of goal displacement. And it happens all the time when you become fixated on the measurable, the quantifiable, the intermediate step, and you just lose sight of what the ultimate purpose of all of this is. Okay? So something else that you have to always watch out for in doing all of this work, another pitfall that is very notable in building theories of change is confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is basically searching for information that verifies your theory of change, verifies your worldview, supports your intervention, and you forget to look for the evidence that may go against that and contravene it. And it's just a simple fact that we can much easier show something is wrong than we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that something is right. It takes a lot of evidence for us to be convinced that something is right. It only takes one piece of disconfirming evidence to prove that something is wrong. The most famous example from science about this is the black swan. When black swans were located in Australia, scientists back in Britain refused to believe it. They believed that all swans worldwide always had white feathers. It took a live black swan brought back to England that produced its goslings that also were black to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that black swans existed. So the black swan has become a symbol that one piece of disconfirming evidence can overturn a theory. Confirmation bias is something else you have to watch out for at all times. You must seek out information that not just confirms your effort to build a theory of change, but might call it into question. So in the book, I talk about different general rubrics that have been developed in policy analysis for thinking about how to intervene in the world, right? One of those rubrics is a 2x2 chart, okay, that basically contrasts who are you trying to influence and what do you have to influence them with? Are you trying to influence a few large organizations or many people? Is an important question about who you're trying in your intervention. What are you trying to do, and what is your budget? You have a small budget, whatever that means. The book doesn't really get into the details of what constitutes small or large, or you have a large budget. And this would be, of course, relative to the problem, the degree to which it is commensurate with the nature of the problem. When you're trying to influence a few large organizations, you have opportunities to do that sometimes through things like regulation. You can regulate them with command and control regulation, or you can impose a tax, or you can investigate them because it's reasonable to investigate the few, or you can try to influence prices in their market. Okay? These are all feasible things to do. But if you're trying to influence many people and you only have a small budget, then all you may be able to do with your small budget is try to inform a large number of people about the implications of their choices. Use what are called hortatory tools. Yes, you can tax them, but you're going to have a workforce that can make sure that they are complying with the tax. And again, here you also can influence prices. And price influence may be one of your best ways to try to shape behavior. So often what we do in trying to influence many people with a small budget, we impose taxes and we influence prices to make it more expensive to engage in negative behaviors that we're trying to discourage, or to subsidize positive behaviors that we're trying to encourage. If you have a large budget and few organizations, we often subsidize them. We find a way to use a subsidy Or we may assist with direct expertise, which is also requires a large budget because it may need a large personnel to do a group of personnel to do that. If we have a large budget, we can also subsidize individuals, and we can also offer case management. Case management is very labor intensive and can only be offered to large numbers of people if you have the budget to pay for it. So there's other examples in the book that go through rubrics like this as ways to think through who am I trying to influence? What type of budget do I have? And then what are the choices that are before me? The book goes on in future chapters, and there'll be videos about that for specific situations where you can use other tools to try to shape outcomes. Uh, the last thing I'm going to talk about here uh, uh, before I finish has to do with the connection between a process model and a theory of change. Okay, so you need a process model. A theory of change. A theory of change needs a process model. You need to understand what is happening in the world before you can intervene. And you have to make that as specific as possible, okay? You need to know the why before you make an intervention to change and produce a different outcome, okay? So there's an example in the book of the problem of why does such a substantial number of young people who enroll in college not finish, okay? So about 23% of of new college students will not complete the degree. They will not complete the degree within 6 years at least. That's usually the number that is used by most colleges as their 6-year completion rate. Okay. And then there are different process models that explain why this is happening. For example, they cannot afford the cost to attend is proves to be too high, right? There is something called the mismatch problem, which turns out to be far more important than I originally ever knew. It turns out to be that a lot of students who drop out of college drop out because they've come to be convinced that the college that they chose to attend is not up to their level of educational attainment. In other words, that they're going to a college that cannot teach them what they want to learn because it's not set at their level of educational attainment. It's actually below their level. Okay. And then another thing is that they come to perceive no benefit. They find out or they come to believe that there is no benefit to earning the degree, and they don't want to go through that work for no benefit, and so they leave. So each one of these results in a different theory of change, right? So if the problem is cost, then you need financial aid, right? If you can provide financial aid, then you can solve that problem, okay? If the problem is the mismatch, you need better consumer and better student information. You need to improve the way in which students understand and evaluate colleges so they will make better choices about where to go and be happier where they get there. And then here, if the problem is no perceived employment benefit, then you might need career counseling, better career counseling to overcome that. Or you might need um, uh, 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 more employers to be involved in the life of the college students while they're in college. And for example, you could have co-op programs where students go to school and also work in a co-op job situation at the same time. Okay, so these are just some simple examples of how you match your process model that explains what's going wrong on one side to theories of intervention on the other. In future chapters of the book, there'll be much more detailed examples of doing that. So this is just a general overview of the beginning of the second part of the textbook, where we move from understanding why we're not getting the outcomes that we want to thinking about how we might actually get outcomes that would be better than the ones we're achieving right now. So let me stop the share. Thank you once again for watching this video. The next video will turn to interventions that are based on known problems with markets. It's sort of the second part of the presentation that started in a previous chapter that looked at how to diagnose problems with markets. Now we'll talk about how to fix problems with markets. Hope you enjoy that video when you see it, and thank you again for watching today. Bye now.